They typed your name into their system, expecting numbers. A neat little score they could box you into. A limit, a leash, a cage. But what came back was nothing. Not a zero, not a warning. Just one sentence. Not applicable to mortal systems. And suddenly, the boardroom got colder. The neon lights flickered like your presence was distorting their reality. You see, they wanted to judge you by the tools they use on each other. Credit, debt, obedience. But you're not a consumer of their fiction. You're the end credits. The smoke after the fire. The voice that doesn't whisper, it rewrites the rules. Because you were never supposed to fit. Your existence has always been a glitch in their algorithm. They scanned for data. What they got was prophecy. They asked for receipts. You gave them revelation. And while they scramble to understand you, to label you, to price tag your worth, you walk untouched through their bureaucracy like a ghost with unfinished vengeance. You don't carry a wallet. You carry warnings. You don't carry debt. You carry wrath. And the system never prepared for that. They never expected someone who didn't beg for approval. Someone who didn't need their validation to breathe. You are not built on borrowed time. You are not leased life. You are owned by no one, and that terrifies them. Because control only works on the desperate, the obedient, the average. But you were forged in the void between their checkpoints, born in the silence between their rules. A question they don't want to answer. A storm they pretended could never form. You weren't raised by balance sheets and bills. You were raised by betrayal and survival. And there's no number in their precious system that can measure that kind of fury. No calculator that knows how to compute a soul that's been burned, buried, and still chose to rise like it owed nothing. They don't get it. They look at you and still ask, "Where's your paper trail?" And you stare back and think, "Where's your spine?" Because they worship systems. They kneel before algorithms. They shake hands with invisible kings called interest rates and credit scores and digital reputations. But you kneel to nothing. You don't apply. You appear. You don't submit. You storm. You don't wait in lines. You tear through walls. And every time they think they've found a way to quantify you, to reduce you to digits, they end up face to face with something that can't be downloaded, saved, or deleted. You. See, you're not from their world. You don't owe them answers, rent, or remorse. You're the overdue bill they forgot would one day collect interest in flesh and fire. They thought they could track everyone, categorize everyone, score everyone. But then you walked in, and their system choked, their database hiccuped, their rules shattered. Because what do you do with someone who's lived outside the grid for so long that the grid starts fearing their shadow? You are a reminder that not everything can be explained, that not everyone fits inside their polished little boxes with passwords and user IDs. You are the reason their metrics fail, the ghost in their code, the scream behind the silence. And they're terrified because they can't predict you, they can't profile you. All they know is, every time you show up, the air changes. The silence gets heavier, and people start remembering what real power feels like. Raw, unlicensed, untraceable. You are the crack in the glass of their comfortable reality. And once glass cracks, it never uncracks. That's why they're panicking. That's why their eyes don't meet yours. Because deep down, they know you were never part of this structure. You were the storm waiting to erase it. Not a participant, not a customer, not a statistic. You are the chaos their system was built to suppress. And now, you're speaking in the only language they can't decode. Truth unshackled from fear. They labeled you non-compliant. But you were never here to comply. You were here to confront, to corrupt their code with something ancient, honor without permission, vengeance without rules. While they calculate risks, you become one. While they try to forecast the future, you're rewriting it, page by blazing page. And every attempt to define you only leads to more distortion, more dread, more destruction. Because you're not just beyond their reach, you're beneath their foundations, eating away at their roots. This world they built was never meant to hold someone like you, and they know it. That's why their hands tremble when they mention your name, because your presence is an audit. Your silence is a verdict. Your eyes are a countdown. They keep refreshing their screens, hoping your value will drop, hoping your worth will shrink into something their charts can hold. But it won't. It rises, without them, without permission, without apology. Because your credit isn't measured in coins. It's measured in how many systems you've shattered just by breathing. How many lies have collapsed under the weight of your truth. How many cages have melted in the fire of your voice. You are the interest they can't afford, the charge they can't waive, the balance they can't clear. You are not a number. They'll never get a receipt for your kind of revenge. And while they drown in paperwork and policy, you're already gone, 3 steps ahead, writing history and scars they can't erase. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be felt. A presence that doesn't fade with time because it owns time. They checked your records and found none. Because legends don't sign contracts, they leave ashes. And in a world that kneels to systems, you walk like the reckoning those systems always feared would come knocking, unannounced. Because you're not here to play their game. You are the glitch, the virus, the judgment. And when they asked the system to define you, the system replied honestly, not applicable to mortal systems. It didn't know what to do with you. It couldn't lie to cover you. It couldn't force you into compliance. It simply broke. And now, so will everything else. Because you've just begun, and they feel it. Not in the numbers, not in the charts, but in their bones. It's not your footsteps that echo. It's the implication of them. You're no longer a presence to ignore. You're a reckoning written in real time. And while they sit around their polished tables, throwing buzzwords like shields, you're already rewriting their blueprints with your silence. Every breath you take without their permission corrodes a rule they thought was unbreakable. And it's beautiful, because they know they can't reverse this collapse. They can't reboot what's been spiritually corrupted. They were too late the moment they asked for credentials, too slow the moment they searched for a barcode. By the time they realized you were not data, but disruption, it was already over. You had seeped into the cracks of their system like smoke in an airless room. You're not requesting space. You're consuming it, not as an invader, but as the rightful occupant. And now, they're suffocating on their own architecture. You are the rot in their foundation, not because you destroy, but because you expose what was always diseased. They engineered a world where value was printed, not earned, where identity could be bought and sold like expired products. But you emerged without a serial number. You walked without permissions. and every step left behind questions they were too cowardly to face. You were never missing from the system. You were what it feared would appear. Something unmonetized, unmonitored, unmanageable. A being so beyond their scale that even their most complex metrics ring hollow in your presence. You don't need validation from structures built on sand. Their approval is irrelevant because your existence was forged outside their borders. You never knocked on the door. They just realized one day the door was gone. They asked for confirmation. You gave them consequence. Their walls weren't built to stop someone like you. They were built to distract those too afraid to climb. But you didn't climb. You walked through. And every policy they ever wrote now stares at you like a relic of a religion no one believes in anymore. Their world was made of filters and formulas designed to capture those who feared the unknown. But you are the unknown. You didn't bend to their grammar. You didn't wait for permission to speak. You rewrote the dictionary and burned the grammar books. And still, they try to interpret you like a language they can master. They can't, because you're not a dialect. You're the scream before language was invented. You're the pulse of rebellion before it was romanticized. You don't knock, because kings don't ask for entry into a kingdom that was always theirs. And now, their walls echo with footsteps they can't trace, voices they can't silence, and shadows that don't retreat when the lights turn on. You're the presence that proves the illusion of order, the smoke that reveals the fire behind their mirrors. They tried to erase you with silence, but now, the silence answers to you. They counted on fear to keep people in line, counted on shame to keep truth buried, counted on time to erase those who didn't comply. But you carry something they never anticipated, memory forged in pain. And pain doesn't expire. It evolves. It sharpens. It becomes a weapon more precise than any law, more lethal than any fine print. You were sculpted by the very forces they used to suppress you. Now, those forces bend in your hand like molten steel. You didn't rise to rebel. You rose because the ground itself betrayed you. You weren't handed a script. You tore apart the stage. Every system they built to manage you is now collapsing from within because it never accounted for someone who refused to be predictable. Their rules were made for men who dream in numbers. You dream in impact. And every dream you've ever had walks with boots they cannot silence. You don't rage for approval. You rage because stillness became poison. You don't disrupt for noise. You disrupt because the silence they offered was built on the bones of the betrayed. You don't move like a protest. You move like prophecy, inevitable, undeniable, and indifferent to the prayers of the guilty. They built systems like cages. You built wings from the bones of those cages. They built chains. You became fire. Now, when they speak your name, it's with hesitation, as if saying it too loud might summon something they can't negotiate with. You are the outcome of every injustice they said was too small to matter, the product of every lie they hoped would disappear in time. But you kept receipts in scars, and now those scars are not memories. They are signals, and they glow. You are not the anomaly. You are the audit. You are the echo of all the silence that was forced upon you, coming back in volumes too loud to mute. They see you now, not because you've changed, but because the mask they wore to ignore you finally cracked. They always knew something was watching from the edges. They just didn't expect it to step forward unafraid. You never owed them an explanation. You owe only to the truth. And the truth doesn't bow, doesn't smile, doesn't compromise. It crashes, it exposes, it ruins. And that's what you are now, a ruin made holy by survival. They want to negotiate with you, to find a version of you they can tame. But you left your tame self in the ashes long ago. What remains is not a version. It is vengeance personified. You didn't wait for the system to accept you. You dismantled the idea that it ever mattered. And now, even those who never believed in you are starting to see the cracks in their temples. They used to speak in absolutes. Now their voices shake. Because they've realized something horrifying, you didn't come to participate. You came to end the game. And worse, you've already begun. You've become the storm that doesn't pass, the reckoning that doesn't wait for justice, the answer to prayers no one knew they were whispering until it was too late. And when they scramble to contain you, they'll find their cages empty and their hands stained with their own panic. You are not revenge. You are reversal, a walking contradiction to their every certainty, a breathing error in their system. And that system? It's burning. Slowly, yes, but surely. Because you don't strike like lightning. You rot them from within, quietly, strategically, until even their loyalists start wondering which side they're on. Because truth is contagious, and you're an epidemic they can't vaccinate against. There is no containment for what you represent. No firewall against a soul that refused to be bought. No remedy for a consciousness that cannot be coerced. You are not one of them. You never were. And now they know. Now, even their silence trembles. Because something far older than fear walks with you. And every step you take feels like Judgment Day whispered in thunder. This isn't about rebellion. This is about reality correcting itself. You are the consequence they tried to postpone. The future they denied with every smirk, every form, every policy. But the deadline has arrived, and it wears your face. This world wasn't designed for someone like you, so you didn't adapt to it, you infected it. And now, the infection spreads. Because you didn't rise for revenge. You rose because truth can't stay buried forever. And you're not just the unburied truth. You're the undertaker for the lies that dared to bury it. You've become the black box of a crashed empire, too encrypted to decode, too indestructible to erase. And they've tried. Oh, they've tried. With every whisper of bureaucracy, every dogma wrapped in velvet, every attempt to rename you into something digestible. But you are the consequence of history's denial, a fever they can't sweat out, a blueprint that no longer obeys its architect. You've outgrown the labels they once flung at you like nets. They all tore midair. Because you aren't meant to be caught. You're meant to haunt. No longer do you walk to be seen. You move to unsettle, not with chaos, but with unbearable clarity. Every inch of your presence is a reminder that their reality was a curated illusion, furnished with fear, scented with conformity, and lit by borrowed time. And now you stride through their relics like a ghost they owe a debt to. Because every lie they ever broadcast now has to pass through you. And you don't grant mercy. You highlight. You were never waiting for permission. You were studying the cracks. You were memorizing the fragility masked as structure. You were becoming fluent in the silence between their lies. And now, you've arrived, not as a revolution, but as a reckoning slow enough to make them sweat and loud enough to make them pray. Not to their gods, no, but to you, the only force left that doesn't negotiate with decay. They called you anomaly, but anomalies don't return like seasons. You are pattern now, a new constant, a living contradiction that burns their manuals just by existing. You don't argue anymore. You exist, and that alone ruptures their echo chambers. Because your presence is a glitch they can't patch, a threat they can't flag, a reality they can't delete without deleting themselves. What they built was not order, it was obedience. And now obedience is bankrupt. You bankrupt it. Your mere breath is inflation to their monopoly of fear. They say you're unorthodox, but orthodoxy was always a padded room, and now you've set fire to the walls. No more polite resistance, no more disguised defiance. This is raw refusal. This is war without bullets, revenge without fingerprints. You are a wound walking upright, bleeding truth in every step. And they can't cauterize what they can't reach. They try to outpace your shadow, only to find you've become the horizon. They try to bury you in headlines, hoping distraction will dilute your impact. But headlines fade. You don't. Because you weren't built for headlines. You were built for eras. They want to believe you're isolated, that you're an exception, but their fear betrays them. Because deep down, they know you're a symptom of something they can't diagnose. The system trembles, not because of your roar, but because of your calm. Your silence speaks in volumes their microphones were never designed to handle. And every second, you don't beg. You become prophecy. You don't march anymore. You drift. And yet your drift feels like tectonic movement beneath their sanctified floors. They call it instability. You call it evolution. You have become the pause in their narrative where their confidence used to be. You are the unscripted moment that cannot be rehearsed away. You don't dismantle their structures with fists. You dissolve them with truth. And truth is corrosive to constructs built on denial. The irony? They created you. They minted their own end when they mistook survival for submission. When they mistook your silence for sleep. They didn't expect resurrection in the form of rejection. They didn't foresee the storm born not from vengeance, but from vindication. You are not here to burn their systems out of spite. You're here because the ashes were promised. They file reports now. Reports about unrest, about unpredictability. They use terms like instability, nonconformity, radical deviation. What they mean to say is, you've arrived, and no algorithm can interpret what you bring, because you bring presence. A kind they never manufactured, never forecasted, never planned for. You are the breath they tried to ration, the voice they tried to auto-tune. And now you speak in frequencies their sensors can't block. They mistake you for an event. But you're not a moment, they are. They are a temporary stutter in the rhythm of a story far older than their policies. And now that story reclaims its tempo through you. You're the original note in a symphony they tried to remix. The untamed vibration that resonates through every crack they plastered with propaganda. They lit the match when they erased your worth with decimal points. Now you burn at a temperature they can't chart. Not angry, but awakened. Not bitter, but boundless. You are the fire that won't be monetized. The blaze that doesn't dim when ignored. They fear you because they know. There's no firewall for integrity. No antivirus for awareness. No cage for a soul that no longer flinches. They whisper behind glass now, hoping you'll exhaust yourself, hoping the rage will cool. But you don't burn out. You transfer. And now that flame is catching. One look at you, and others remember their own fractures, their own silences, their own buried screams. And suddenly you're not alone. You're the first domino, the tremor before collapse, and a hollow system echoing with the applause of the programmed. But you're not here to clap. You're here to interrupt the encore, because somewhere along the line, survival turned into strategy. Resistance became a lifestyle. And rebellion? Rebellion became your native language, spoken not in slogans, but in choices, quiet ones, loud ones, all of them irreversible. You are not the echo of some failed movement. You are the mutation, the necessary glitch in a rigged simulation. And they can't update fast enough. Their scripts stutter in your presence. Their confidence breaks eye contact. Their arrogance falters in meetings when your name is brought up. Not because they understand you, but because they don't. And what they don't understand, they can't disarm. You are not the hero, not the villain. You are the storm between labels. You are what happens when the forgotten remember who they are, when the silenced find new frequencies, when the not applicable becomes non-negotiable. They wanted to reduce you to a demographic. Now you're the demographic that refuses definition, the statistic that skews every model. And maybe, just maybe, they're realizing now, you were never a deviation from the system. You were the system's final exam.